And good morning. Welcome back to our 10-minute tips over your cup of tea. I do have my cup of tea over here, but I've actually almost finished it. A bit of an early start this morning. So this week we've been focusing on ways that parents can get to understand their children's learning, and just kind of touching base with the different platforms and software that your children might be using. We've looked at how you can find your students' work in Google Classroom. We've looked at how you can find your way around Microsoft Teams. We've looked at some Apple settings, and we've looked at how to find your way around your students' Google Drive. So today we thought we'll just finish the week with some ideas on how we can ask some questions of our students that gives us a little bit more information about what they've been learning. I'm a mother of 3, and I have many times asked my kids when they came home, how was school today? And you get the answer, good. What did you learn? Nothing. What did you do? Nothing. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's had those kinds of answers from our kids. So what can we do in order to get a little bit more from our kids and to understand what they've actually been doing? So it all comes down to the questions that we use. I guess most people know that there are 2 very common types of questions, open questions and closed questions. Closed questions being ones that only require a simple yes or no or very succinct answer. How was your day? Good. Closed question. So it's about finding some open questions where our kids have to give us a little bit more in depth in their answer for us to kind of understand how they're really feeling and what they've been really doing. So let's have a look. I asked our team, said, hey, look, guys, what are some questions that you think are really good questions to ask students and kids to be able to get a better idea of how they're feeling and what they're doing? And so these are some of the things that they've come up with. So I'm just going to pop one up here. Hopefully you're seeing this on your screen now. Really good question. Can you explain how you got that idea or that solution? At the moment, most of us are still working at home with our kids, so we're right on the spot with them, which is really fantastic because we can engage in some great conversations with them. So instead of just sort of kind of saying, what's the answer? Just ask them, can you explain? Really good 3 words to start a question, because that requires more than just 1 or 2 answers. Another great question, can you explain? So again, there's our can you explain. Can you explain the task that you're doing? So not just, hey, tell me what you're doing, but actually explain it. So just kind of rephrasing those questions can be a really nice way to engage in some discourse with our kids. Another question that one of our trainers came up with, which I thought was a really awesome one, what excited you today that you want to learn more about? And that opens up some really great conversations with your kids about what does excite them. Sometimes what we think is exciting for our kids is not necessarily what they think is exciting. So starting from the platform of what excited you today that you want to learn more about, and then you can branch off there into all sorts of conversations about what excites your students. This was a really lovely one. What made you think today? So actually thinking about their learning is really important for our kids these days. Not just explaining what they do, but actually thinking about what they do and being able to articulate that and being able to tell you what it is that they are thinking about thinking of. So what made you think today? And it doesn't necessarily have to be related to a subject content matter. a question like that could actually be opened up into a social interaction that they've had with some friends, or something that they made, or something that they saw. So it's not always necessarily connected to the schoolwork. I think having those conversations with our kids that show them that we're interested in them as a whole person, not just as a learner, can be a really effective way to open up some of that dialogue within our family. How did you feel about your learning? I think it's really important. I mean, I know for me, when I was at school one year, we were, I guess, quite early adopters, or our teacher was an early adopter, of trying to develop some self-agency with us. And he gave us this great weekly timetable. I think it was like maybe year 7 was kind of like Form 1 or something back then. And we literally had, I can't believe we did this, we literally had our desks at the back of the class. There were 10 of us, and we faced the back wall, and our backs were to the rest of the class. And he gave us this weekly timetable. And it was up to us when we did our work. So long as we did that work over the week, we could choose how we did it and when we did it and what order we did it in. No one ever asked us how we felt about that. We had a great time, and if I'm honest, I don't think we actually completed a whole week's work. But nobody ever checked in and said, hey, how are you guys feeling about this? And probably the first thing we would have said is that we felt really isolated in the fact that we had our backs to the rest of the class. The teacher at the time felt that we were able to be independent learners, and I guess we probably were, but the way that the geographical nature of the classroom was organised, we didn't feel good about it. So I think just touching in with your kids and asking them, how do they feel about their learning? How do they feel about what they're learning? And how do they feel about how they're learning it, are two really important questions that you can really dig deep into how your kids are feeling, and maybe even enact some change for them if you find that, they're not actually feeling that great about it. A couple of things to think about too is, like, we ask our kids questions all the time. Sometimes our kids are over. I know my son used to say to us, don't ask me any more questions today. So thinking about the number of questions that we ask our kids is really important as well. And just thinking about that quality, thinking about tweaking them from a closed question to a more open question. And also just thinking about some of the other comments that we say. So this one really intrigued me. I'm not sure if some of you may have heard of a woman in the States called Carol Dweck, and she's done a lot of research into growth mindsets and the way that kids learn. And something that she came out with was that, and I'm guilty of this as myself as a parent, telling my kids that they're clever or telling them that they're smart when they do something that you think is pretty cool, when in actual fact, it turns out to be not such a great comment to make for our kids. What happens is that when we tell them that they're clever or we tell them that they're smart, later on down the track, when they come up against something that they find really difficult or something that they can't quite conquer, it actually has a negative effect, because then they feel like they're not smart or they're not clever. We haven't actually given them coping strategies or helped them to develop different ways of thinking. So instead of saying to your kids that they're clever or they're smart or they're amazing when they do something that's really cool, just change the wording and say, hey, I really like your thinking on that. Or I really love the way that you thought that through and came to this conclusion. So you're actually putting the focus on the process rather than the end product. Because when we help our kids work through processes, that gives them the skills to build the resilience that they need going forward. And this is my favorite one. This is a Jo Boaler one. Jo Boaler is a professor at Stanford University in the States, and she's done a lot of work with Carol Dweck as well around building growth mindsets, but her particular field is maths. And she says, don't share the idea with your kids that you were bad at maths. And interestingly, research has shown, or her research has shown, that particularly for mums, it's really important that you don't say this to your kids. They did some research on some students over in the States and tracked where they were progressing. Then they had their mums tell them that their mums were not good at maths at school, and the achievement of the kids fell. As soon as their mum said that, even though they were already achieving, once their parents had shared that idea with them, their achievement actually began to fall off. So do just think about the comments that we say to our kids about our own learning. We want our kids to know that we back them, that we're there for them, and that it's about the process of what they're going through. So we want our questions to be asking them about the processes, not the outcomes. So not, did you do good work today? Closed question. Yes, no. But how was your thinking today? What did you struggle with today, and how did you get around that? Or what were some strategies that we could use? So hopefully that's giving you some ideas of just some ways that you can tweak your questions to get more than those nothing good answers out of your kids, and engage in some awesome discourse about their learning and help them to develop some strategies that will carry them through and be successful in their schooling. So that's our 10-minute tips for today. Wrapping up our week of helping parents get to grips with their kids' learning, and hopefully you'll be able to go forward and have some wonderful conversations with your kids. Enjoy your cup of tea, and we'll see you guys next week.